Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 31 of the Arch City Poker Podcast. My name is Tony, alongside Nick. We own, operate, and run ArchCityPoker.com. Nick, how are you doing today?
Great. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Nick. I'm doing great. I'm going to be
Good.
playing in the big game tomorrow night, so that'll be a lot of fun. I've been working a lot to fix some of the issues I had and some of the mistakes I made last week. Because I don't like losing, and if I do end up losing, I'd put a lot of emphasis in not making the same mistake twice. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We will see. But yeah, I think we have a pretty exciting episode today, Nick. This is going to be an episode about what does good coaching look like. And I think a lot of people are curious as to if I were to hire a coach, if I were to get involved with a training site, if I were to have a one-on-one session with somebody who is a player who is trying to get better at the game, and they want to take that next step, and they wanted to get into coaching, they wanted to get into a website, they wanted to do whatever. And we were to say, like, to give you some pointers and say, well, you're going to know if you get good coaching if it looks and it sounds like XYZ. And I kind of wanted to have us kind of do a little bit of a run through. And, at one point in time, you were my coach, and we started from the basics where I was a losing 1-2 player playing in Hammond Horseshoe. That was there well before all the cool casinos came up in the Chicago area, before the Bears decided to move there, all those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, then from there, I know I went to Oklahoma and I played at the Riverwind that was there, played a little bit in Texas, and then Ohio, and kind of did all the things. So I had a lot of different questions, and I had progression that had leaps at points and it was stagnant at points, but I was able to go through and, we navigated a lot of that stuff together. And I just wanted to go through like a lot of the issues I had. And, this is, you have an opportunity to kind of highlight, kind of show everybody the veil of, what does good solid coaching look like? Because if it took a bad player like me and it made me into the player that I am today, dare I say it is good coaching, because I think I came to you with a mess and you were able to pick it apart, kind of maneuver in such a way that we took it slowly, one step at a time. We would identify a leak and we plug it. We find a leak and we plug it. It didn't happen overnight. It took a long time because humans make mistakes, even if you tell them the right thing to do. And we have finally gotten to a point where, now me personally, I'm taking shots at some of the biggest games I've ever taken shots at, right? I'm taking shots at, 25, 50. So that was never something I thought I would be capable of when I was grinding 1-2, back in the day. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of jump in. So, and then really quick to kind of plug, if you're brand new to the podcast and you didn't check out episode 30 last week, head on over to the YouTube channel, like, share, and subscribe. Tons of great content for you to consume. And if you are a weekly follower and subscriber, I hope that this episode is going to be helpful to you and kind of provide some context, because, at one point, Nick was bad and I was bad, and you grow, and the ways in which people grow are vastly different. I like somebody coaching me and telling me what to do. I personally, Nick, don't like playing online, sharing 5,000 hands with somebody, and then having them point out generalities about what they're seeing. For me personally, I just like live low stakes stuff. I want the exploitative stuff. I want the old man who just got done working at an oil change shop, who comes in and his clothes are all dirty and he's opening from under the gun, and how in the heck do I deal with that? Right? I want the real stuff. So yeah, so as we begin, Nick, we're going to begin. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
So one of the first questions I ever had for you. So we kind of went through some basic preflop stuff, and we tightened up a lot of that because I think I was lacking basic fundamentals. I didn't know traditional, like, what are decent hands to open with, to call with, to raise with. I was probably limping a whole bunch. But I do remember once we started tightening up a little bit of the preflop stuff, one of the main issues and questions that I had was, how do you win when you're card dead? And then when you finally do have a hand, maybe it misses and nobody folds, or you feel like everybody's a calling station, so you always have to have the nuts, or you have to really bank your hand hard because nobody's folding. But if you never are hitting your hand, it feels like you just have a losing session. So that was kind of an issue I had, and like that I felt and experienced, where it's like, if I'm not binking my hands, I'm not going to have a winning session. So that was like my big number one issue, Nick. And if you
Mhm.
were to talk to kind of take yourself back to the past and talk to Tony or somebody else who's going through that right now, kind of what would you say to him?
Yeah, I think there's this like big misconception that, like I hear a lot of guys complain that they can't win when they're sitting at a table with like a bunch of nits or like super loose passive players. Like they need action players. And of course, like in games that have more action, the ceiling for like your win rate's probably a little bit higher. More variance comes with that. But I mean, as far as being card dead, having to deal with, how do I win when I'm not flopping stuff as much as I should be? Dealing with nits, loose passives. I mean, I I think it's a sign of a really good player and then a coach that works with a player that, teaches them in a way that you have to be almost like a chameleon. Like you have to be able to adjust to, what you see in front of you at the table and then execute the plan. And so, if I sit at a table, and I would tell this to a student as well, that, if you have like if you don't have a choice of like a table that obviously has looser action, that's I think a little bit easier naturally to exploit for a lot of players. They kind of can, in a way, like sit back a little bit, or you just kind of play like a stronger range of hands and you'll just outflop your opponents a lot of the time, especially if you're playing 100 big blind poker or less. Then it's really just about pipping your opponents. It's about honestly just like making better hands, better draws, playing in position, taking advantage of fold equity. But that's a good, transition into if you are playing with a bunch of nits or you feel like I hear players all the time, like I'm just not hitting flops today. Like it's just a lot of air, and that can happen. And there'll be some spots where you just aren't going to be able to win. There's going to be some spots where you should just be check folding on the flop if you're out of position. But when I work with players, like we work on, instead of worrying so much about what you're going to flop, or what you don't flop, we need to actually shift our mindset to what kind of a range does our opponent have? And if we take an action on the flop, whether, let's just say, speaking in generalities, like what we do in general is bet range small in position. We like to check range out of position, because what ends up happening is our opponent, I mean, as simply as I can put it, they play pretty straightforward versus that strategy. And we're able to range them, or at least narrow their range pretty significantly, so pretty accurately. We're able to cap them, meaning that a lot of times when they just call the small range bet, then we know pretty much exactly what type of range they have. It's weaker. If we check out a position and they just check back or they bet really small, we kind of a similar thing. We can range them more accurately. We can cap them, and so I like to teach the students that I work with, especially present day, because it's funny you mentioned, Tony, like you're a lot better player now than you were a decade ago. I mean, I'm a far better instructor than I was 10 years ago. That if I mean, naturally, if you're doing something for that long, you should get better. If you're not, you're just wrong. You're either not working hard enough or smart enough. But point is that these days I want to get my live low stakes students to focus on what their opponent has and what we can do about that, as far as how does our hand relate to where we think they are. And so it's like, even if we flop a lot of air, like the vast majority of pots that you guys will end up winning are going to be ones that don't go to showdown, that you don't really have much in. Like you are, simply put, forcing your opponent to underrealize their equity, because we figure out where they're at within their range, and then we apply the right kind of pressure. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden, I bet flop, my opponent calls, and then it's like, well, I'm just going to blast off the next two streets. Like, well, there's a little more that goes into it. Like, it's not all that complicated, but like, if we're really deep, then yeah, we can use much larger sizings as we progress, starting even on the flop. Like, we can go 40, 50%, and then, continue with barrels for much larger. And then there could be overbet shoves on river if you're that deep. But if you scale it back, if you're having to play 100 big blind poker, and especially in 1-2 and 1-3, where pre-flop raise sizes are a lot larger, The pots just kind of artificially are larger than what they should be in theory. Well, you still can bluff the nits, you still can bluff the loose passive guys, but you got to set it up in the right way. Like you got to start a lot smaller with your bets if you start betting early. If you don't start betting early, like do you want to get a much better feel for where they're at because they'll play straightforward against a check? You sometimes then play a two street game with still quite a bit behind to where you can get your opponent off of a lot of stuff. You just got to be willing to range them and then execute the plan to attack them. So, really good players that exploit live low stakes games to the fullest. A lot of people be like, well, this guy, he always has a huge stack in front of him or he just always wins. I promise you that like pretty much, I mean, I don't know if I should ever use absolutes and say 100%, but like 99% of players that crush those types of games, 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, 5-5, 5-10, the vast majority of the time they are winning, or the vast majority of pots that they win are going to be pots they don't win at showdown, and they win because they applied pressure and they got opponents to fold, and then they can play the song and dance well though. Like if they have value hands, basically we also find ways to size properly. Like a lot of players I see that they'll think they played a hand well or they won like a decent pot, they could have won so much more because they missed out on a street of value or they didn't size properly to target the type of range that our opponent has at that point. And so yeah, Tony, I mean, like the big thing is I know there's quite a bit there, but for me it's like shifting the mindset first and foremost to get our students to understand that yeah, you're going to miss a lot of flops, like especially like with how many hands we have you generally playing pre-flop. Like it's not like a crazy amount, especially if it's 100 big blind poker. But as soon as we get deeper, like we're gonna be playing, we're gonna open up the range. We're definitely gonna open it up quite a bit in position. But even if we miss a lot of flops, a lot of times we are gonna be heads up based on the pre-flop sizings and in the types of actions that we use. Even if we go 3 and 4 ways, sometimes like yes, we're not gonna be able to always bet range in position then. We're not going to be able to like there's some spots where we shouldn't probably always check range out of position because maybe we have a loose passive player that's just not going to put the money in for us enough with, enough of his range. So there's spots where like we just have to adjust to what we believe our opponents have and what they're going to do. What is, if they do X, what can we do about it? What are our options? And then choose the best one from there. So, I mean, I think back in the day, Tony, like when we first started working together, it was, if you were card dead, it was like, we're going to be patient. We're still going to enter pots with a stronger range. Our opponents wouldn't really care all that much about it. But even back then, there probably should have been more of an emphasis on, like, yes, we want to play well pre-flop. We want to be patient, not like just get impatient and gamble unnecessarily. But there needs to be a serious focus on just crushing these guys post-flop as opposed to pre-flop. Winning pots that don't go to showdown, like the old, you got you online guys, your red line, like being able to significantly deny equity in the form of just consistent pressure. And that comes from being able to accurately range your opponent, size properly, have a plan that you start sizing properly from the beginning. So you leave enough wiggle room if need be, or if you're deep enough, you can obviously increase. But it's all about understanding where your opponent is within their range and then what are you going to do about it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, there's a lot of little nuances you can see with this kind of long monologue I have here, but it really does come down to that. Like focus more on what your opponent has, not so much on what you do or don't have. And that's the starting point.
Yeah, there was like, if anybody has played with a lot of people, you hear table talk. One of the most common things people say is just act like you have aces. And yes, fundamentally, like not the thing to do with every single hand, but there is some like truth
Right.
to it where what would aces do on this board? What would aces do on this board? What would aces do on this board? And you take that and you just combine a ton of different hands and you say, what does aces and ace king want to do? What does aces, ace king, ace queen, and ace jack want to do? What does everything from jacks through aces want to do? And once you start doing that, it sort of starts to not really matter, at least the way you think about a hand. One of the biggest kind of revelations I made, like it starts to stop mattering what exactly I have.
Yeah.
And it's just finding and identifying situations that favor myself. So if somebody limps from under the gun and we open the button with ace jack suited and we go heads up to a flop that is king high and they check to us, well, we're going to we're going to bet. If it's a static board, we can elect to maybe size down a little bit, but that board should favor us more than somebody who limped in from early position. And even if they call a small sizing, which then gets most of their range to continue, there's a ton of turn barrels that are going to blow them off their hand, whether we connect it or not. So it oftentimes didn't matter so much that I have ace jack suited, which is a strong hand against an under the gun limper. On a king high board, on a queen high board, we should still be ahead of that person. If it's 4, 5, 6 all spades, we don't have a spade. Well, that's probably right in the wheelhouse of the limper, right? Now, we still might be ahead of them in a lot of contexts, but there are boards that help you figure out what you should be doing with your hand and what you shouldn't be. So that was kind of the first eye-opening thing, because I remember being card dead for hours and just whining and complaining that I'm just not having hands to do anything. When I finally have a hand, there's action in front of me that doesn't let me do anything. Like, let's pretend you have jacks on the button and there's a 3-bet and a 4-bet and a shove and a call, and all of a sudden you're like, well, jacks aren't good here, we're just going to fold, which is fine. But that doesn't mean that we're just waiting for jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace, king to do anything. It's just circumstance based. So that was, yeah, probably the first large adjustment I had to make. Was like, yeah, being card dead's going to happen to everybody, but you're going to have situations that warrant aggression, that make sense to be aggressive. And instead of thinking about what you have, think about what does the board mean? What does the board mean for them? What does the board mean for me? So yeah, Nick, you're exactly right. And I think that very quickly translated into my second big question with you, which was, what do you do when you completely whiff the flop? Meaning that maybe you didn't have a pair, you don't have any backdoor straight draws, you don't have any backdoor flush draws, and you just feel a little trapped. Maybe you opened with king queen offsuit and the cutoff, or maybe the button called, and the board comes ace high. Now, in this circumstance, we have a backdoor straight draw, but it feels, from the person with king queen off, it feels like you whiffed. It feels like you're just behind. You feel like they always have an ace, or whatever the case is when you're, yeah, like I was, a losing, struggling 1-2, 1-3 player. Ace high boards, unless I had an ace, I always assumed that the villain had an ace. And I wasn't ever sure how to navigate boards like that. So, Nick, if you were to tell somebody who is complaining that they're just never banking what they need to, they're just whiffing, um, not necessarily if they're card dead, but maybe they are getting cards. They're getting their ace kings, their ace queens, they're getting tens, but the boards are just not favorable. You open tens under the gun and the board is ace king X, and you're like, well, this check folding feels too nitty. And when I'm aggressive, I feel like I'm just always running into it. How does somebody balance that line of being profitable when they don't hit their hand necessarily?
Yeah, again, I mean, it just goes back to, whether we flop top set or whether we flop air. I mean, it's about kind of figuring out where our opponent is as early as we can. And once we do that and we can accurately define their range, then we can come up with a really solid plan for, our exact hand in a really exploitive sense. So just to kind of use like this practical example, because I feel like the last answer was good, but to be honest, it probably could be like a little cleaned up. So let's say it is an ace high board and I've opened, let's say we open like king queen of diamonds under the gun and we get a caller from the button, and let's just say we're playing 100 big blind poker, and let's say it is something like ace 7-4 rainbow. And the thing is, like, on these ace high boards, for example, like the really static boards, so like either ace high or it could be something like queen 3-3, like it tends to be like disconnected rainbow paired boards. um these guys are going to be incentivized, at least in their minds, whether they're right or wrong, to have almost accidental balance, and they're going to have some slow plays. Like, they're going to be able to mask the strength of their hand with their sizings, because if they have a really good hand on ace 7-4 or not a really good hand, a lot of times there won't be like a huge difference in sizing. Some will be that drastically different and transparent. Some are able to check back like some weaker ace X there, not a ton, but some, like enough, because they don't feel vulnerable. The big thing with live low stakes players, guys, is that they play primarily, in my opinion, over the my career, it feels like they really play based on fear, mostly fear. Some, and then some will get. It's a combination of like fear and greedy. Like you see the guys that will make it like $30 pre-flop as an open and 1-2 with, and they'll say, I there's no good way to play jacks, and they'll show jacks. It's because they don't want to take jacks post flop because they're terrified of, a lot of you guys are guilty of this. Like, you're terrified of playing a lot of different hands post flop. You're terrified of big pots out of position, like with deep stacks. And I get it. Like, those aren't great spots. But the big thing is that, again, like, certain boards, like, there aren't as many of them. Like I mentioned, like, kind of those really dry static ones, your opponents are gonna be able to mask the strength of their hand pretty well. And so those are ones that exploitively we tell you guys you probably don't really want to do almost any betting. Like, we can, if it's 100 big blind poker, we can take a hand like ace king or better there exploitively and just start betting. And if we feel we need to mix in, like, what I say, ace 7-4, like, if you have 6-5 suited, you probably could start with that. But like, almost honestly, guys, like, these days, like, for example, I'll exploitively just bet like ace king or better there only, and I'll bet really large because the parts of their range that I want to target at that point are the ones that are going to continue for really large. Like, I'm not worried about getting, betting small and then trying to get multiple streets on ace 7-4 out of 7-6 suit or pocket nines, because you're not going to likely get multiple streets. But if they have an ace, nobody drives to a casino to fold top pair in 100 big blind poker. So that's why I would start going large, especially if I'm out of position. And I don't need to bet anything else. Everyone will be like, well, isn't it really obvious that you're only, like, if you're only betting ace king or better in that spot? Guys, there are so many spots that come up that we are betting like everything that I'm about to go into in a second, that it's going to be perceived that you can have anything at any point. Like, they're not going to be able to narrow down when you have like a really narrow, obvious range. So if I have my king, queen of diamonds, for example, I'll check. And because what does betting do if we're gonna start betting now? And like I said, let's say you don't bet large and you're like, well, let's bet small and let's try to, like, maybe we keep them wider and then we can start barreling or something. Think about, like, how many profitable barreling scenarios are we gonna have off of ace 7-4? Like, if we get like a Broadway card, we might have showdown value. Or if we get like a jack or 10, like, we could start, barreling the gutter, or if we pick up like a backdoor flush draw. But a lot of times your opponents, like I said, are going to be able to mask the strength of their hand, and they love to trap. If they don't feel they're vulnerable, they feel the best way to get money from you is to play it in the trickiest of ways, or the most deceptive of ways. So they will flat with a lot of really strong hands on those really static and dry boards. And so you don't really have as many profitable barreling opportunities as you think you have. Now, so instead of betting, let's check and give our opponent all the rope to let us know where they're at. And like I said, they could check back like some weak top pair. But that's the best hand they're probably going to check back at that point because, again, go back to, are they afraid on this board with what they have? Not necessarily. But if they have two pairs or a set, they know, like, even the worst of players are going to know that, like, they can't probably start with a trap by checking back in position. They want to be able to stack you, and so they're going to start putting money into the pot. So when they check, it doesn't mean on that board specifically that they can't have top pair or a hand that they don't kind of like, but it takes away, it's basically like, what do they not have? Like, we're using like deduction, if you will. And so when they check back in that spot, now I know, instead of taking kind of a possibly GTO approved spot to maybe bet, and it's not probably being bet as often as you guys think in that spot, because if your opponents are cold calling, they theoretically should have still a stronger range. They should have enough ace X that you don't have that much of an advantage. But the point is, if we check exploitively and my opponent checks back, now I know that a large majority of their range is showdown value or air. So now I know that going over a 2-street plan now is, now I feel much more confident and comfortable starting to attack on the turn if need be. And that could be in the form of delay c-bet, or that could be in the form of check raise. Because one of my favorite spots I talk about all the time, like, these guys will bet, maybe small, and then you can attack them. And that one's a little trickier. Like I said, they can have some top pair. That's why you would like to have enough wiggle room that you could check raise, and then you could plan to blow them off for their hand on the river if they call. But let's flip it real quick to, like, let's say it is, instead of the ace 7-4, let's say it's something like jack 9-6 two-tone. You get like a pretty dynamic and wet board. Well, if we don't have a value hand that we feel at 100 bigs we can just start betting, and a lot of times we won't, we would just tell you just check, because you're still going to get better info out of your opponent where they're at within the range there. And on those boards, they're going to be much more straightforward and much more truthful. So again, this comes down to, like, if you understand how the population is going to perceive what type of hands they have and what type of textures. And it's not all that complicated. Like, you guys will say, well, there's so many different textures, guys. Like, how am I going to memorize all these? You don't have to do that. Like, you just know either basically dynamic or not. Like, is the nuts likely going to change on runouts, or is it not? On ace 7-4 rainbow, the hands that they like the most on that flop, they're still going to like on most every runout, right? But if they, on jack 9-6, that's a lot different. Like, there are a lot of different turns and or rivers that come that can change the kind of hands that people have that they really like. So it's still a matter of, you know, like, again, whether we flop air or we flop something huge or flop something in between, the whole plan is to, again, range our opponent as quickly and accurately as we can. Can we cap them? Is there a situation where we can't quite cap them yet? Because if you bet out on an ace 7-4 with the king queen and they just call, I wouldn't cap them there. It's like, there's like, they feel invulnerable on that board if they have anything really good. I would expect a lot of slow plays there. But let's say you felt the best option against a specific player. Like, let's say on that jack 9-6, Tony, we tell people check range, out of position, dynamic board, whatever. But let's say it's only a 100 big blind game and you have a really passive player behind you and you don't think he's going to bet like some of those showdown value hands for like protection, for example, thin value protection. So let's say we do have, I don't know, like aces on the jack 9-6. And let's say, like, okay, well, let's just start betting and putting the money in ourselves then. It's a rare spot where we would decide to do that. Well, I would probably start by betting like 40% pot, because again, like, if I just bet really large, yes, there's still a fair amount of hands within his range on that kind of board that, would continue that we're doing okay against, but we're really, I think we can do a better job by putting money in. And if he just calls that smaller amount on that kind of board, we know exactly what type of range he has. Like, we know that he has probably top pair at best, and that's a lot of like one pair stuff and a lot of like random draws. And so that gives us a really good plan moving to a turn where, yeah, there are going to be some tough dynamic turns in this situation, right? But I can cap my opponent on the flop. And so if it's jack 9-6 two-tone and we get an offsuit deuce on the turn, I know we have the nuts now. And so now I have the plan moving forward to the turn. It's like, okay, if I get this brick turn, what kind of stacks do we have left? Like, do I have enough to bet two streets? Do I want to take away a street because we're playing out of position? I can get away with an overbet shove here. What if it's a dynamic turn? What if it's a disgusting turn that you guys and all of us loathe? Like, what if it's jack 9-6 and then we get, let's say, a 7 or a queen and it completes the flush? Okay, it's not great and we can't cap our opponent. But let's say, for example, maybe we bet really small. Because we can't cap our opponent yet, we still can get value and we still figure out pretty much exactly where our opponent's at. Why? Because they play mostly, again, based out of fear. And so if they turn a flush or they turn two pairs or a straight, they're likely not just calling the small bet because they're so worried about getting, quote, sucked out on, unquote. And so there are lots, like, this is just an example, guys. Like, there are poker, especially live low stakes, it's basically like, I think there's a quote that Bruce Lee uses, or has used when he was alive, rather, where it's like, be like water. Like, you want to be able to adjust and you want to be able to take your hand based on what you think your opponent has and take the best line and exploitive sizing that you can. So again, a longer answer, if you will, Tony, but the main thing is these first two questions and then the two answers that I've given, you can basically zoom all the way back out and say, if I can just figure out what the hell my opponent has as early and accurately as I can, and then add in the okay, is he capped or uncapped? Like, it's going to be really hard for your opponents to play against you because you're like, even though your opponents a lot of times on flops and turns can still have like a wide enough range that you can't say exactly what they have. But like, Tony, how many times like when we're playing opponents can we like, out of 100 times, like when we go to the turn, like I would say it's well more than 90% of the time that we pretty much know like what kind of hand our opponent has.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah, so go ahead. Yeah,
no, no, it's definitely the most aggressive point in the hand that I think is when like that you shifting gears or putting the pedal down to the floor, or it's the one of the best spots to like once we've identified where they are, it's like, okay, how do we react to that now? What do we do?
exactly. Like what is their range and what are we going to now do about it? That's the if you could ask yourself just one question at any point, that's the question to ask. And then you basically just go from there. Like everyone, I think the big thing, like a lot of like this whole episode is about like good coaching, like good playing resulting from good coaching. Like, I mean, I've been in the coaching industry long enough now that I've seen it from like both ends as far as what it's like to coach low stakes players, what it's like to coach high stakes online players. I've been on all over the map with it. Like I've worked with guys that have played 25-50 online. I've worked with guys that play 1-2 live. Like the whole key to being a good instructor and making a player better is making the material relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I took a bunch of solver sims and I studied it with Tony 10 years ago, it's like, okay, like it can make him fundamentally better, but how do we apply that to his everyday 1-2 game that he's playing in? And if I take the same solver sims and I'm working with a 25-50 player online, it's like, okay, like it fundamentally could make him better, but like, do we need to stick closer to what this is suggesting, or are there population exploits that we need to like mix in? Like, so, obviously those are two extreme examples. You're going to play a much different game and likely make, the most that you can make with different types of strategies. One of which, of course, being like, if you're playing against worse players, you want to dumb it down, you want to simplify, and you want to solely focus on what they have. And then you go back to your two cards, not what your range is, not what your range would do in this spot, not what sizing your range would like. What do your two cards, what does your hand want to do based on what your opponent's range is? What is your opponent's range and what are you going to do about it? And if you don't know, then you can fall back on well, are they capped or uncapped? Like what stack size are we looking at? What type of player profile this is? And again, it seems like kind of a lot going on there, but this is why we have this platform. This is why we have archstudypoker.com, where we walk you guys through this with all the hand examples, with all these podcast episodes, with all the different types of content that we put out. It's basically little pieces of a large puzzle that guides you step by step to get to the point where when you're at the table, you're not sitting there with all these thoughts circulating, like going around your head. It's not going to be this web of like, I see all these instructors, like whether it's guys on YouTube, whether it's actual legit instructors that have or haven't worked for training sites, or they're one-on-one guys. It's either like, here's a solver sim, this is what the sim says, do this. That's what the worst instructors do, guys, honestly, in my experience from other like players I've worked with, like their testimonials, guys that I know that have worked in the industry. But
Yeah, or they
the
always
best
just say
one,
sometimes.
yeah, or it's a mix. It depends. Like that's
Yeah.
such a cop out, right? So we can do so much better than that though. Like it's one of those things where it's like we really can simplify it down to like that's why Tony and I suggest to you guys, like, for example, like check range out of position. It's like instead of worrying about like, oh my God, like the solver says there's so many different boards that we can bet 20% of the time and we check 80% of the time. And like we use this size in here, but we would mix in this size in here. Like I'm not saying that things like GTO Wizard or all these different live solvers that exist now, guys. I'm not saying they're not useful. We've talked about this on this platform before, but it is so much more efficient for you guys to find good instructors who understand how to exploit recreational players. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do that. It just takes, like we said, an understanding of how players, like what is human nature? How do they assess risk reward?
Hmm.
And when you look at live low stakes poker, it's an interesting case study in human psychology, like based on fear and greed. And that's how most, like almost 95% of players, 95% plus of players will operate is they bet, not necessarily thinking like a lot of, like the one example I think Tony is like, they'll almost, I would say 99 of 100 players, they'll bet on a two-tone flop, like basically spade diamond guys, if you don't understand. And you guys are, a lot of you are going to be guilty of this. You'll say to yourself, well, I'm betting because I don't want you to catch up or I don't want you to
Yeah.
suck out on me. That's not why you're betting. You're betting because you want, if you're betting, if you have a value hand, you're betting because you want to get value out of his range. You want him to call. You want him to make that call and you want to build a pot and get as much value out of that specific hand or that part of your range, if you will. Like Tony, we've talked about this in this platform a lot the last few months where like players will think I'm nuts because I will bluff an amount on the flop or turn a lot of times thinking I'm using an amount. Like as soon as it doesn't even matter what street I'm on, guys. Like I'll just say it this way. Like I will range my opponent and let's say I cap them and I have a good situation where I think we're deep enough that I can run a multi-street bluff. I will use a sizing, like I know in some spots on the turn, for example, like let's say my opponent bet 15 on the flop and I check call, and let's say there's like 45 in the pot, and let's say we get to a turn, I check and he bets like 15 again, or he bets 20. I know that I can bet like 300 there and take the hand 100 out of 100 times. But instead of doing that, and yes, of course it's going to be a little bit riskier, but this is where I go back to like understanding risk reward, understanding like the percent of time that your opponent is going to actually win this spot, how many times he's actually going to realize equity when he doesn't maybe have that much here. I, instead of making it like something huge, like I might make it like 60 or 75 or whatever number I think is the highest number that I can get him to put the money in with that part of his range to then blow him off of that hand later. So like it's just,
Yeah.
it's giving you guys an example of like
Yeah.
there's a
That's,
huge yeah, go ahead.
well, I'll say I think you're trending into more of a skill set that gets obtained certainly a little bit later. Like once you can understand how to cap your opponent and how to extract max value from them, I think is a skill
Yeah.
set that I think it'll happen because it's like you said, you're going to go to step one, which is they bet small on the turn after betting small on the flop. I need to raise and smash them. And then the next level to that is, well, instead of blowing them off their hand and getting the fold, which was going to be a winning hand, how can we be even more profitable? And
Right.
what specifically are you targeting to get to continue? So if they're going to call a $50, $60 bet, that's just like the next level. That was all I was going to say. Nothing to
No,
derail
you're
you.
right. You're 100% right. And I'm glad, this is why we work well together. And that's why this podcast exists, is that my one leak as like an instructor would be, for example, like I would understand the type of player that I'm working with, guys, to where like I wouldn't take it to this level if I didn't think you were ready for it. But like because Tony's here, like I feel like in a way like he's like the student on the other end of this right now. But like for example,
Yeah.
like if I was working with you, just to get you to understand, I'm not talking about you like as in you, Tony, like you, the viewer here. Like if we can just get you to a point where, let's say you raise with the king queen of diamonds, for example. Let's say there's a limp caller and you're in position, you raise and he calls and your heads up. One of the most common spots in live low stakes poker. And let's say you do flop air. Let's say it's jack 7-2 and it's spade club. Let's say it's black two tone. You have king queen of diamonds. Instead of thinking like, oh, like another flop, we've just airballed. Like we didn't flop a king, we didn't flop a queen. And let's say there's 30 in the pot and your opponent bets 15. Over 90% of you guys would just probably fold. And the other 5% to 10% may consider raise because you're like, well, the guy donked into me, so like I'm just gonna raise, right? And I'm throwing out just kind of arbitrary numbers, but you get it, Tony. Like the vast majority of them would just be like, well, I have air. I'm just like, I guess he just has a good hand. Excuse the cat making noises again. God, unbelievable, like these guys. So anyway, so the level that I would want to get you guys to first is, instead of thinking like, well, I flopped nothing and my opponent bet, so like he must have a hand. It's like, okay, but what does his bet mean? Right? And like what do leads mean in these kinds of games? Like, is he really just betting half pot like with a really strong hand? Like, how do they operate based on mostly fear and some greed, right? And so like they would go for check raise with a lot of their best hands here. Players don't typically lead with like sets or 2 pairs at that point, right? So a lot of it is like a capped kind of junky range. Like there's a lot of junk in there. So I would get you guys to the level where it's like, instead of just saying, well, we have red, king, queen, so we just fold, we're going to call. And it's like, what? We're calling with red, king, high? Like, what's the plan here? It's like, well, we're going to evaluate how he really feels about his hand on the turn, because what will end up happening is they check a lot or they bet small again. And so let's say that happens. Let's say the one scenario that we don't really love to see is they barrel, right, Tony? So let's say it's jack, 7, deuce, spade, spade, club. And there's now, let's, I don't know, let's say it's like in jack, 7, deuce. Let's just say it's like a 6 of diamonds, right? Like kind of a brickish card, if you will. Doesn't change a whole lot. So we floated or called the 15 into 30 on the flop, so another 60 in the pot. And let's say they follow through with 30. So now it's just half pot again.
Yep, which is a really common line too. Usually
Exactly.
half pot is usually the turn barrel for most villains.
Yes. And a lot of times when they just double their sizing, it tends to just kind of be like, I don't really know what to do. This, like, I don't want to check and face a larger bet. It's kind of like a block in a way. So where I would get you guys to next, and it's like, okay, so our opponent has likely confirmed that his BS bet on the flop is now a BS barrel, and he's likely very capped. So the plan would be, how much do we have left? Like if I raise here, do we leave not enough on the river to get him off of, say, like a weak jack X hand? Like maybe he limp called with king jack offsuit or queen jack offsuit preflop, right? Probably one of the best hands he's going to have at this point. If there's not enough room, but there's enough room to shove over him and tell the story that like, hey, I got you. Like I slow played like a bigger hand, and because a lot of players will do that in live low stakes. And so it's like, simply put, getting you guys to where it's like, who cares if you have red, king, queen there? What we care about is we know our opponent likely doesn't have a hand that can play for stacks at that point. That's the level we want to get you to. And then what Tony mentioned, where it's like, if we had enough left, like the next level would be like, can I put in a raise amount that keeps him around for the river to then like blow him off his hand? Or like there's other like slightly more complex things we could possibly do. But the whole point is, again, guys, like going back to the first 2 questions, going back to what we just talked about here with this hand example, it's like, what did I do in this hand that was super complex or special? Nothing really. I am, it's kind of like a game of chicken with your opponent. And it's like, if they do something that's unorthodox, or it's possibly, it's a common spot that they show some weakness, let's see how they follow through in the turn. Because back in the day, like I wouldn't consider it a leak, but what I would do is I would just raise range against those donks, right? I would raise because I knew they were capped. And I would be like, I would win the pot a lot of the time. But when they continued, they had a stronger range of like top pair or like a nice draw that then you need more fold equity to blow them off their hand profitably on later streets. Whereas now it's a similar plan, but it's a different type of plan. It's like basically less risk. Like I'm calling with everything. So like, let's take away the red, king, queen guys. A lot of times if they just bet like half pot there, I'll just call with even just top set. And you might be like, well, what the hell are we doing? There's all these quote scare cards that can come that can beat you. Or like on the flip side of it, some of you might be like, well, there's action killing cards. Like, why would we not want to put more money in? Look, guys, transparent sizings, right? Figure out, what does your opponent's action mean? And if they use an aggressive action, what sizing are they using? If my opponent on that jack 7 deuce bets $15 and I have top set, I'll call. And then if he follows through with a large barrel in the turn, okay, now I know exactly where he's at. And like, if he has a hand we can play for stacks with. But if he does that same half pot or he checks, okay, now I know it's like, okay, we might have to alter the plan a little bit. Like, what exactly does he have? He probably has like some kind of weird pocket pair or something. Like, what kind of sizing can we use to get value out of that part of his range, right? But let's say on the flop, instead of the 15 and the 30, he bets pot. He bets 30. Okay, I know now my opponent really likes his hand, so what's the best course of action? Put as much money in as humanly possible, as fast as we can, because they love their hand. They're going to think like, well, he could be bluffing. Like, I can't fold this hand. It's a really good hand. So it's just a lot of little examples, guys. You can see how that hand plays differently based on different actions. If he checks, which the majority of players will do, we bet really small. How does he react to that? If he just calls, What does that mean? Cap range. What do we know moving forward? Well, if we have bluffing hands, we likely are going to be able to run a profitable bluff, I would say well over 90% of the time. If we have a value hand, we just need to figure out sizing now. We need to figure out on what types of turns make sense that as far as like, is he capped? Can we go really large? Is he uncapped with certain turns? Like, did a flush and straight come in that he could have? Yeah, like possibly, but we're not afraid of it because they're going to play based again out of basically fear. We bet small, whereas like the solver would say, well, you have a hand that now has showdown value. If you bet, they can attack you with raises. Forget all that. Like, that's not going to happen with these guys. They're going to check. If they have a straight or flush, they're probably going to raise you. If they don't, then they won't. And then you can possibly a spot where a lot of you guys are like, well, like I think I played the hand well. Like I don't know what's going to call me on the river when I just have one pair. Guys, I can't tell you how many times it is Jack 7 deuce. The 8 of spades comes in to complete a gutter and the flush. They check call really small. And then let's say it's some random, like let's say it's a king or another deuce or a 3 that's a non-spade on the river. Can't tell you how many times I've gotten such good value out of just top pair or one good pair in that spot because I've ranged my opponents where it's like, yeah, guys, it's a scary board, but the story that they've told says I don't have the cards that we should be scared of. So figure out where your opponent's at.
Yeah.
This whole episode so far, it's like figure out where the hell they're at as early as you can, and then you can come up with a good plan.
I can't emphasize that enough. And it is, you can't win a hand if you don't know where your opponent's at. Right. So again, I'm not going to rehash everything you said because you said it better than I ever could, but I'm going to speak from the person who is not as skilled as you are and how like navigating boards work. And the most common line in live low stakes is going to be they open pre-flop, maybe they're in position, maybe they're not. It's going to be betting on the flop. Most people just say they're going to see bet. They'll check the turn and then they don't know what to do on the river.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most
or the
common,
turn facing action, right?
Yeah, or let's pretend you're in position, right? Somebody limps. We open with king, queen of diamonds. The limper calls. We go heads up to a flop. They check, we bet, and they call. So now we're going to go to a turn. It goes check, check, because we're scared because they called the flop that they're going to call the turn and we don't have a king or a queen. And then the river comes and it's a whatever it is, a blank. And then they lead the river. And then now as the hero, we feel like we're in a guessing game now. We're like, well, I mean, I don't really know. Do I call? Do I bet? That's the most common line. It's in position, out of position. It's either they're leading into you or you get to a river and you're like, this hand doesn't have showdown value. So I either need to bet, but I don't know if it's good or not. And that's going back to like what you were saying, Nick, which is if we don't know, if we haven't placed bets, if we haven't analyzed sizings, if we haven't taken actions to figure out where the opponent is in a hand, we have misplayed this hand.
Right.
So, and it is hard for the average person to do this every single hand. It is hard to look at your hand, forget what's in your hand, and make a bet that's trying to get information versus like saying, I have top set and I just want, I want $1 million and I want it now. Right. So, and it is hard. It's like, I still make mistakes. I know strong players who still make mistakes. Like just because you're hearing it in a podcast that we're talking about here doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go to your 1-2, 1-3 game. And every bet you do, you're like extracting value from every single hand that your opponent possibly could have. Like the world is not going to be nice to you. And like, you're going to have slow plays when you think that they shouldn't, or you're going to have the things happen. But the biggest fundamental takeaway is every time you bet, no matter if it's big, no matter if it's small, it should be for a specific reason. And it's either to get value or to get information or to get a full, like it needs to be some type of information gaining activity. So if we're betting small with top set and they just call and they're not raising, not doing anything, well, now when we go to the turn, we can decide, okay, they kind of like their hand a little bit. We can look at what the SPR is, what the stack to pot ratio is, and we can really figure out with the turn sizing where they are based on what their flop action was. And if you said the best thing so far, I just loved hearing it, which is when the villain's making a bet, if it's half pot, if it's 3/4 pot, if it's an over bet, it's them telling us how much they like their hand on the turn. Like that's what it is at live low stakes poker. there aren't enough good players for people to be betting small with top set on the turn. Like that's just not happening enough because better players are trying to get better value. They want the money in too. Bad players want the money in just as much as the good players want the money in.
Mhm.
So as
Yeah,
long
and
as
Tony, let me,
yeah.
or go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
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 you go ahead and
it's
finish it. Yeah.
I gotta love talking about this stuff. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I mean, I know we're running a little later than what we usually do, guys, but this is an important topic that I want to make sure we don't like shortchange you at the end here. I want to give you another just quick, a practical. I think the practical examples really help you guys a lot. So, like, go back to that Jack Seven Deuce texture, spade club. This is kind of what Tony and I were talking about at the end, where we're combining the thoughts that we have here out loud, where it's like figure out where your opponent's at within your range, and then also what do their sizings mean, right? Like it's all again little pieces of the puzzle. So I'll give you guys an example. Let's say Tony's my opponent in the hand. Let's say it's Tony from 10 years ago. Let's say it's like kind of fishy Tony, right? So let's say he limps and he
Reminiscent
calls
of today, Tony.
yeah, right. So let's just say it's 10 years ago for now, and let's say that you limp call me pre-flop, and we go heads up to the flop, and it's that same Jack Seven Deuce two tone. So, guys, let's say I have Ace Queen of Spades. Let's say I have the two overs and the nut flush draw. Tony checks. Let's say I bet. Let's say the pot's 30. Let's say we're playing again roughly 100 big blind poker. So let's say I want to start a little smaller. I want to use smaller sizing here to more efficiently kind of range my opponent and leave myself enough wiggle room if I need to get out of this hand later without making a hand, right? And I might have some showdown value, I might not. We'll see. But so let's say I bet 10 into the 30. Let's say in scenario A, Tony just calls and the turn is a three of spades, bringing in the front door flush, and now I have the nut flush. Tony's check call of the really small sizing on the flop to me, guys, tells me that he likely has at best a weak jack. And he probably has a lot of like random pocket pairs, but there could be some straight draws and there could be some flush draws, right? So when we get this flush completing turn, this really dynamic turn, Tony's going to check. And even though I have the absolute nuts, I'm actually going to bet really small in the spot a lot. When these dynamic nut changing cards come that makes our opponent uncapped, and I believe that he moved forward with a cap range to now where I'm not so sure if it's capped, if that makes sense, because he just check called small.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bet small because now he's going to tell me exactly what
Yep.
type of hand he has. Like
I
if
would
he has
raise with all my flushes. I can tell
right,
you what I would do. All my straights, all my flushes, all my
right.
sets, like all my things.
And
Yep.
so if he just calls again, I know that's like, okay, Tony probably has like Jack 10. And now I know what sizing on the river will actually work. Like a lot of players will be like, well, I just have the
Yeah.
nuts on the river, so I'm just gonna go all in. It's like, well, that's not gonna work. So, but if he raises and we already have our really good hand, right? So, but let's go to scenario B. Let's say Tony check raises the $10 third pot flop bet to let's say 45. I'm like, okay, he's probably doing this with like a lot of two pairs or better. Maybe very rarely like some kind of combo draw that we kind of are in really good shape against for the most part. But let's say it is what we think it is, Tony. Like these guys play based on, again,
Yeah,
mostly
10 years ago
fear.
it would be it's not with not really with draws. Usually
Right.
it would be a lot of
That's my
check
point.
calling, but it'd be like sets
Yeah,
and 2 player plus if I'm
exactly.
yeah.
So the vast majority of players are going to show up with two pairs or better. So we have a nut draw. There's a ton of implied odds with this because we know that when players make huge hands in live low stakes, they can't make, and I'm not saying they should in a lot of spots, but they can't make those laydowns when it's kind of obvious that they're beat. So I would call. Let's say the same exact three of spades comes on the turn. Tony checks. How is this different from scenario A? Because in this scenario, guys, so in scenario A, he check called the $10, the third pot. So now we have 50 in the pot on the turn. I would have bet like 15 to 20 bucks on the turn with the nut flush. Yes, with the nut flush. I would have bet really small like that. In scenario B, where Tony check raised flop, now we get the same three of spades. He checks.
Call.
There's let's say 90 or whatever it was, or he made it 45. So let's say there's 120 in the pot, and let's say we have roughly 250 left, whatever. Guys, I'm putting 250 in. And you're like, hang on a sec. Jack 7 deuce, the same exact turn. You have the same exact hand. One hand, you bet 20. The other hand, you're betting 250. Guys, my hand, yes, it helps me like as far as like the thoughts that I have before I get to that point are range my opponent, what is his range, and what am I able to do about it? What's the best result for my hand? Well, if I know that Tony has sets or pot, like on Jack 7 deuce, it's mostly sets. Um, and he has sets on that 3 of spades turn, like I know he isn't going to lay those down. So let's put all the money in. Like
Right.
all the money in is a huge fave.
Well, yeah.
But in
And how
scenario
many
A,
times, Nick, are
yeah,
people are just going to bet like, I don't know, 3/4 pot thinking that it's like a large size bet, and they're just not,
yeah.
you know, God, Lord knows what the river's going to be, but then you're giving your opponent a chance to get away when they would have put all the money in.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so and if we're like super deep, it's like, okay, well, if we have like 1,000, like I'm not gonna put in 1,000 right there, but I'm gonna put in an overbet because you better know that the set's always calling. So like you can put in like 3, 4x, and then you
Mm-hmm.
can shove river on non-board pairs. You know exactly where you're at. So whole point is with this last example, guys, you can see two drastically different sizings, but again, it's not based necessarily like right away. Like it's not the first thought isn't I have the nut flush, so I'm gonna bet whatever sizing. The thought I have is what the hell does my opponent have on the 3 of spades? And now what am I able to do about that? What is the best line or course of action here? Range your opponent, come up with a plan, and execute the plan. It's not as complicated as the solvers or other instructors or anything make it out to be. Like, we don't need
Yeah.
to worry about what our range is going to do in that spot. We don't care what good poker is supposed to look like there. What we care about is what does Tony have in that spot, and how do I best attack with the ace queen of
Yeah.
spades?
And it's important to note, like, it takes practice. Like,
It does.
if you're not used to doing this, it
Yeah.
it becomes, at least for me, like when I'm locked into a game, it becomes mentally taxing after a while. Like when I was younger, I could put in a 12, like not that I was good back when I was younger because I wasn't thinking like I am today, but I could put in a 12, 14-hour session like a hummingbird. And now if I'm playing a session where I have to lock in, I mean, the most I can do is like 6 to 8 of like really
Mhm.
being locked in before my brain starts just like melting. And that's just also because I'm getting older. But
Right.
like thinking about poker the way you're supposed to be thinking should take some brain power. And if you're ever telling us about a hand, if you're telling a friend about a hand, and you can't explain what you're trying to accomplish with any of your bets on the flop, turn, or river, chances are there's some leaks in your game that just by giving a hand history, we're going to be able to identify. So, yeah, Nick, I think just grade A stuff. Um, but yeah, so that's actually going to bring us kind of like interestingly to our next point, and that's we're trying to at Arch City Poker, we're trying to identify some ways that we can better serve you, the community who are listening to the podcast. They're active on the Discord. They're members in the Arch City Poker Learning Management System, where all the PLO and the No Limit Hold'em content is. We've actually opened up kind of like an option within our Discord, a private channel for members to provide hand history analysis, in which case they can provide a hand history of something that they played, and we will provide an in-depth coaching response that provides some feedback on the lines that they took, some alternative lines that they took, some pros, some cons, some leaks, some fantastic feedback for you to get on your hand, not just fold pre, not just size up on the turn, not just fold river, like some real in-depth hand history analysis. And you can do that. And we're getting it all set up, making sure that there's no issues for anything, but we're going to make sure that through Patreon, when you'd sign up, you would then get access to the private channel in Discord. If you had questions about it and if you wanted to talk to us about it, you're going to see the Discord link within the kind of thumbnail that we have here on the very bottom on the right-hand side. It's going to give you access to our Discord channel. Now, everything about Discord is free. You don't have to do the hand history analysis, but if you are serious about being better as a poker player and perhaps maybe just watching videos through an LMS maybe isn't your learning style, and you just like talking and engaging and being part of a community, that's an alternative option for you that we're trying to begin to promote and emphasize and help everybody become a better player, because being a good poker player is hard. It takes effort. It takes work. It's not, I guess, gambling, quote unquote. It is a card room, a casino, but the way we look at it, it's a game of information, right? You're making plays, you're making decisions based on information that you have, based on the strategy that we have here at Arch City Poker. And it is designed to help you be a winning player. Now, you can take the perfect line and lose a hand, and that's not the point. The point is when you're going over a hand, Did we do everything correct? Did we range our opponent correct? If they bink the one card that they needed to bink, then so be it. If they called with a pair of eights on a board that they shouldn't have, then so be it. Did we do the things that we were supposed to do? Checkbox. Then we're gonna be printing money. It's just poker's a long
Yep.
game. But
Well said. Yep.
yep. But anyways, Nick, I mean, this podcast was a little bit longer. This is probably one, I mean, we could have made this one 3 hours, honestly.
Yeah.
There's so
Yep.
much that I love talking about when it comes to this. And honestly, if you guys like hearing about this topic and you want us to continue on this, I think I'd be more than happy to go over it. But we want to hear back from you and the feedback. And one of the feedbacks that we have from the YouTube channel was people wanted to learn about bomb pots and kind of how to navigate, how to play them, whether it's no limit hold'em or PLO. But we are listening. We are reading the comments. So if you have feedback for us that you want to hear, go ahead, leave a comment and let us know so we can help, kind of create that environment for you. But yeah, Nick, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, whether, let's say you guys are somebody that like thinks you could be a prospective student, like you're looking into getting involved with us for coaching, like whether you choose us or not, I would caution you that, or at least tell you that, like, explore your options, but as soon as you work with somebody who is trying to like really overcomplicate this or really get you to be very GTO heavy if you're playing live low stakes and they understand you're playing live low stake, it's very clear, you've made that clear, that's where you want to get better and those are the games you're playing, like I'd be very cautious about moving forward with that type of instruction because this is the type of instruction and suggestions that best beat those games. Like you want to work with somebody and play a style yourself that's very simplistic, that's going to work over multiple spots, multiple streets. You really want to narrow this down to having a few like key thoughts, like we've said many times in this episode already. Range your opponent, figure out where the hell they're at, and then come up with a plan for your hand from there. As long as you don't overcomplicate it, and like Tony said, like if you can reason in your own head or aloud to somebody at some point, what you're doing, you're not always going to right now choose the best line, especially if you're starting off early in your poker journey. There are going to be ups and downs. And Tony said, it does take hard work. It takes reps to get comfortable with all these spots and to get comfortable thinking during a hand, thinking like how we suggest that you guys think. It's not just going to like snap click like that. For some of you, it might earlier or sooner rather than later for others. But if you're serious about getting better and you want to have more fun, like stick with it. That's why our platform's here. That's why Tony mentioned the Discord, all the platforms are, that we have, all the avenues of learning. But stick with it, keep working, and it becomes a lot easier. I mean, I was one of you guys, honestly, like a long time ago, like when I was first playing, like I kind of thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. And like, I was the same as you as far as like, oh, I flopped the air with the king, queen, the red king, queen. I guess this guy just has it. Like I didn't understand what his bet meant. I didn't understand how to range him and move forward with just a really simple plan to execute. The more often you do it, the easier it does get, and the more innate everything becomes. Like you don't have to be thinking about everything because it kind of just naturally happens. Like you go through this process of, like I said, like range him and then go from there. Like there's all these easy thoughts that come to me that I honestly, like, I don't consciously think about these things a lot of times because it's just part of the process. So, if you guys ever have any, like Tony said, further questions or comments, let us know, engage with us. And that's the easiest way for us to, for example, follow up on this episode or topic, or look into other topics such as the bomb pots, which we will cover. But yeah, like this is obviously what this platform is designed for. Like these are the games that you guys play in. These are the games that we play in and enjoy playing in and we like to talk about. And it's just a great, I love it because of everything we just talked about, Tony. Like I love the fluidity. I love that it's not just like, okay, player X does this GTO thing and then player Y in return does this GTO thing. Like, yes, there can be some brilliance and some cool stuff when you see like in the high stakes scenes and the high roller bowls and all that stuff. But in the live low stakes games, because there's so many different like kind of spots, like some spots are pretty common, but you get all kinds of players that play so differently from each other. And there's so many different sizings.
Yeah, right.
And
I mean, like, I'm going to emphasize your point, but like the World Series of Poker is going on right now. And people are playing in a $250,000 tournament. Like, that's not relatable. Like,
right.
watching someone play, $200, $400, that's not relatable. Like, that's
Right.
That's not even close to what you're going to experience in your 1-2, 1-3, your
No,
2
yeah, there's
5
just so many
games. Yeah.
things that the recreationals that you guys are part of that there's so many things and lines and sizings that you guys do that are so different from what you would see on TV or from a solver. And so like that's why we're here is like we're here to help you understand why what the player population is thinking. And if it is like a specific player profile, like we're here to help you understand like what exactly is he doing and what are we going to do about it? Not,
Mhm.
well, he didn't do what the solver said, so what do we do? Or I'll just do what the solver says here. Like, no, that's not good enough. Like, we're either leaving too much money on the table or we're burning money. Either way. And so that's what makes this platform in Arch City Poker so great is that, again, like we're focused on these games and how to make you more skilled and better equipped to beat these games.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed episode 31 of the Arch City Poker Podcast. What does good coaching look like? And like I said before, like, share, and subscribe. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, take care, everybody. We'll see you again next week.